Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Ian and Ty for the enormous amount of hard work that they've put in to ensuring that this conference can meet today. And I'd also like to thank the civil servants at the Department for Education, who've done such a wonderful job in preparing for this conference, and indeed such a wonderful job over the course of the last 4 years in helping us to implement a programme of reform, which I believe is making a tremendous impact on the opportunities of the next generation. And it's a particular pleasure to welcome all of you to our first ever Global Education Reform Summit held here in London. Many of you may have been at Lancaster House last night when the Mayor of London, my colleague Boris Johnson, was able to welcome you to this great city, and he emphasised that it was his ambition to make London the Rome of the global economy. And I thought it was a brilliant metaphor that encapsulated both a nod to his classical learning and also the scale of our shared ambition for the 21st century. But I was brought back down to earth when I looked at how the Press Association had reported Boris's comments. They reported that it was the Mayor's ambition to turn Britain into the Rhodes of the global economy, and they said the Mayor was nodding to the holiday island in the Aegean, with its mix of fun-loving party atmosphere and impeccable weather. Clearly the Mayor has set his ambitions very high for London's future. Anyway, the acoustics perhaps could be better in Lancaster House, or perhaps the extent of classical education available to Press Association reporters, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to try to avoid any ambiguity in what I say today, because I'm delighted that so many of us have gathered here, because everyone in this room, whatever their professional background, has a story to tell about the changes that idealistic teachers are making to improve the lives of the next generation. And everyone here, I suspect, will also have experiences to share about the specific challenges that they've faced in helping children to succeed. And I hope that over the course of the next 24 hours, all of us will be able to learn from each other about the successes and the challenges in order to ensure that in the future we can all make a difference for good to the lives of young people. Because everyone here is united by more than just a professional commitment to improving education. We all share a moral purpose. We want to liberate individuals from ignorance. We want to democratise access to knowledge. We want to make opportunity more equal, and we want to give every child an equal chance to succeed. And nowhere has the case for reform of that kind, to drive that moral mission, been clearer than in England. This government has a long-term economic plan to secure a better future for our children. We want to deliver the best schools and skills for our young people. We want young people and their parents to have the peace of mind that they'll gain the skills they need to get a good job, no matter where they live or how well off they are. And the reason why that mission matters so much is that when this government was formed in 2010, we inherited one of the most segregated and stratified education systems in the developed world. More than a fifth of children left primary school without reaching a basic level of literacy and numeracy. And 2/5 of students finished full-time education without even the bare minimum level of qualification that most employers and universities demand. And what made that scandal more shameful was the inequality that it entrenched. The poorest students overwhelmingly attended the weakest schools. And as children made their way through the education system in England, the gap between rich and poor only widened. Closing that gap is a personal crusade for me, but it's also an economic imperative for every developed nation, because the twin forces of economic globalization and technological advance are transforming the world in which we all live. Our jobs, our lives, our economies and our societies are going through dramatic and irreversible change. And for the next generation to flourish, education systems in every nation must equip every child with the knowledge and skills, the qualifications, the character and the confidence that they need to succeed. Because we know that children who leave school with no skills or low skills will find their employment opportunities increasingly limited and their horizons inevitably narrowed. If we're to defeat the evil of youth unemployment, if we're to give the next generation economic security, then we have to accept, it's unarguable, that many, many more children now need to be educated to a far, far higher level than we've accepted in the past. So we need not just to close the gap between rich and poor, we need to raise the bar on what we expect from our education systems. Now, globalization and technology make reform imperative, but they also allow it to be more collaborative. We have to achieve both much greater equity and much higher standards than our predecessors. But the good thing is that we also now have access to much richer data and much deeper knowledge about what works. We now have the networks and mechanisms to assess policies more rigorously than ever before. We can compare innovations and we can learn from each other. In the past, great teachers, and indeed education ministers, have operated in isolation from any systematic and rigorous analysis of which of their interventions actually worked. Views on pedagogy or funding, the structure of education systems, all had to be taken on trust. But in the last decade, there's been a much more rigorous and scientific approach to learning. Instead of a faddish adherence to quack theories about multiple intelligences or kinesthetic learners, we now have the solidly grounded research into how children actually learn of leading academics such as E.D. Hirsch or Daniel T. Willingham, and indeed great teachers like Doug Lemov, who'll be speaking a little bit later today. And when it comes to analysing which interventions, approaches and techniques help children to learn more quickly, more deeply and more sustainably, we've also got access to a better bank of data than ever before. The OECD's PISA study, along with the data from Pearls and TIMSS and other global studies, have transformed our understanding of what works at the level of education systems. And that data, and the data about what happens in individual classrooms with individual classroom practitioners, has been analysed by reformers from John Hattie to Sir Michael Barber, so the lessons of what works can be shared more effectively than ever before. And one of the most encouraging trends in English education, which I hope will help cause the cause of reform worldwide, is the way in which those now leading the debate, now demanding data, now driving evidence-based change, are teachers. We commissioned Dr. Ben Goldacre, the author of Bad Science, a brilliant debunking of pseudoscientific myths and fallacies, to help us to improve the use of evidence in English education. And far from there being any pushback from the profession, the biggest enthusiasts for his work have been teachers. Teachers such as Andrew Old, Daisy Christodoulou, Robert Peel, Joe Kirby, Chris Bolton and Tom Bennett, who's here today, have used social media and professional networks to drive this move towards a more rigorous and evidence-based approach to helping children learn. Now, we in the UK government want to do everything we can to support this move. We believe that the evidence base that we're building here in England can help children worldwide. We've set up a new charity, the Education Endowment Foundation, to trial and evaluate the most effective techniques to narrow the gap in attainment between children from rich and poor backgrounds. And we've also set up, under the inspirational leadership of Charlie Taylor and Vicky Beer, a network of teaching schools to act as generators of evidence and excellent practice in education in the same way as teaching hospitals have for generations helped to generate medical innovation. These teaching schools are schools which are rated outstanding by our independent inspectors, and they are pioneering breakthroughs in learning, and they're helping to build evidence from which all professionals can benefit. And what's happening with teaching schools here is happening with similar organisations across the globe, from the What Works Clearinghouse through to Uncommon Schools, and of course What Works on the Knowledge is Power programme. And we'll be hearing from Doug Lemov of Uncommon Schools and Aaron Brenner of the Knowledge is Power programme during the course of this conference. Now, we've built our reform programme in this country on the evidence that we've gathered so far of what works, not just in our own system, but also in those countries where the gap has been narrowed and the bar has been raised. We've studied what works in the highest performing and most improved education systems. One of the most improved in Europe, indeed in the world, is Poland. And we'll be hearing from one of the ministers who drove that reform in Poland to transform the opportunities of children there. One of the fairest and one of the most consistently high-performing education systems in the world is the Netherlands, and we'll be hearing from Sander Dekker, the minister responsible for primary and secondary education in the Netherlands. But we're also casting our net as far as we possibly can. We in this country have sought to learn from the powerhouses of education reform in East Asia, in Singapore and Shanghai, and we'll also be hearing from one of the master teachers who's ensured that in Shanghai, high standards and greater social equity have been achieved simultaneously. Looking at those international examples have meant that we have had a programme of education reform here that sought to distill the highest common factors of all of those successful systems. So we've set high standards nationally. We've said that every child should be following a stretching academic curriculum to the age of 16. We've said principals, head teachers, should have more autonomy, particularly over hiring and firing, more freedom to set an appropriate curricular policy for their students, more freedom to shape the school day, term and year. And to balance that autonomy, we've also said that accountability needs to be sharper and more intelligent through more rigorous, externally set tests, more intelligent, focused inspection. And alongside that, we've helped those teachers and those principals who've been driven by a sense of moral purpose to deliver on their mission by devoting extra money to helping the poorest students and then celebrating success wherever it's found. And we've also done everything that we can in order to ensure that the authority and respect and prestige of the teaching profession is enhanced. So we've done everything we can to ensure that children behave and respect the authority of the teacher. So we've scrapped absurd policies which prevented teachers from keeping control in the classroom, which included no-touch policies that meant that teachers could never effectively keep order. And we've also given teachers power to manage pupil behaviour in a more effective way than ever before. By following the evidence, by adhering to the principle that what's right is what works, there's been a renaissance in English state education. The benefits of our long-term plan are already starting to show. There are more great schools, and we'll hear from some of them today, more great teachers, who I know we'll all be listening to during the course of this conference, and more pupils, including the great pupils from Hove Park School, who are studying the subjects they need to get a good job, to go on to an apprenticeship or to go to university. Since 2010, the number of children in failing secondary schools in this country has fallen by almost 250,000. And 800,000 more pupils are now being taught in schools which are ranked good or outstanding by our independent inspectors, compared to the figures in 2010. And around 50 of those schools now ranked good or outstanding are new schools that didn't even exist 4 years ago. In the same period, 600 of the worst performing primary schools, especially those in the poorest areas, have been taken over by expert sponsors or head teachers. And the majority of those are already leading other schools with a proven track record of success. Now, I want to acknowledge that these changes are an explicit continuation of a policy that was set and trained by two of my Labour predecessors, Andrew Adonis and Tony Blair, the architects of the Academies programme. Progress on reform, I'm afraid, stalled under Gordon Brown, but it's been accelerated again under this government. This coalition government is now ensuring that the original impulse behind the Academies programme, behind that reform movement, is given extra impetus. So the very best heads now control many more schools, and thousands of children are being given a better start in life. Underperforming schools which have been taken into the Academies programme are improving more rapidly than those schools which still remain in the hands of local politicians. And we've had a stunning example of what can be done, most recently, here in London. There was a school which used to be called Downhills Primary in the London borough of Haringey, and which has recently been reborn as Harris Primary Academy, Philip Lane. When Downhills was under the control of local politicians, it failed its pupils for year after year. For almost a decade, it drifted in and out of the very lowest category of performance, special measures. Pupils failed to meet minimum standards in maths and English for 5 years in succession, provoking repeated demands for significant improvement. When this government acted, and when we proposed that Downhills should become an academy and benefit from the leadership of great head teachers like Sir Daniel Moynihan, who'd brought success elsewhere, the local Labour Party and trade unions, I'm afraid, fought reform every step of the way. But 2 years later, the evidence is clear. Ofsted, our independent inspectorate, report on Harris Academy, Philip Lane. They say pupils' progress has improved rapidly since the Academy opened in 2012. Leadership and management, including governance, are outstanding. Leaders have brought about considerable improvements in teaching, behaviour and achievement because of high expectations. This transformation is a credit to the hard work and dedication of the school's teachers and the leaders of the Harris Federation. Harris Primary Academy Philip Lane is now giving hundreds of pupils and parents a brighter, better chance in life. Real social justice delivered. Unlike all the Harris Academies, and particularly the two Harris teaching schools, the Harris Academy Philip Lane doesn't operate in isolation. It collaborates with other schools to spread best practice and outstanding teaching techniques so that other schools outside that federation can benefit as well. And the leadership shown by the Harris Federation is being shown by many, many other school leaders. All over the country, failing schools are being taken over and transformed by the Academy's programme. And it's important to remember that the Academy's programme, like the emphasis on research in education reform, is being driven by teachers. In the East Midlands, the Greenwood Dale Trust, led by Sir Barry Day, has been responsible for dramatic transformation in hitherto underperforming schools. As a teacher, Barry's worked in some of the most deprived schools in the country. He specifically set out professionally to help children from the poorest backgrounds. As head of Greenwood Dale School, a secondary in an extremely deprived area of Nottingham, he transformed a failing school so that it's now one of the most successful in the country. Today, he's overseeing 22 academies and 2 new free schools, and he's using the proven track record that he established in one school to reach exponentially more children than ever before. And there are many, many more examples of innovation and ambition by teachers in our system today. Look at Reach Academy in Feltham, a new innovative all-through free school founded by teachers, ranked by Ofsted as outstanding. Look at the London Academy of Excellence, a new sixth form free school which draws its students from one of the most deprived areas of London and is now sending them to the top universities in the world. And also look at the work of another inspirational school leader, Sir Michael Wilkins. In the Outwood Grange Trust, he's doing what I know so many in this room aspire to do, taking the magic that's transformed the lives of children in one institution and spreading it so that many more can benefit. But these successes, driven by teachers, doesn't mean that the job of education reform is done. There is still much further to go. In 10 years' time, children who started school back in September 2010 will be finishing compulsory education at the age of 18. The first cohort since our reforms began. So today, I'd like to be clear about what our education system should be achieving by that time. We need to spell out what a world-class education and education system will look like, not just today and tomorrow, but next year and in 2024 and beyond. We need more and more schools run and more decisions made about education by teachers, not by politicians or bureaucrats. We need higher standards and higher expectations from every school and every pupil, at every stage and every age. We need more children from all backgrounds taking core academic subjects, the best possible preparation for apprenticeships, places at top universities, and good jobs. We need a drastic reduction, indeed I hope the elimination, of illiteracy and innumeracy in our country. We need a marked and sustained rise across the board in school quality, driven by every school being part of a supportive, collaborative chain or network. Because when you give schools more autonomy, you find that they collaborate more and all benefit. We also need to ensure that every classroom is calm and orderly, and that every child has access from the beginning of education to a stretching and challenging curriculum. And we need to build on the progress that we've made in reforming qualifications so that all our examinations command respect amongst universities and employers alike. At its heart, we need to ensure in this country that every child, no matter where they live, no matter their background or the type of school they attend, gets the sort of education which introduces them to the best that has been thought and said, so they can be authors of their own life story. That's the mission which drives me and which I know unites all of us. That's the goal which we should hold at the front of our minds, not just today, but in the weeks ahead. Now, of course I know, we all know, that any change to the status quo is difficult. And of course it's always the case, it's in human nature, that some people can be more frightened of what might be lost than inspired by what we can all gain. But for years, for decades, the status quo in education just hasn't been good enough. We can't allow that status quo to be perpetuated. We cannot allow the poorest to be failed. So I have a specific challenge, not just to all of you in this hall, but to some of our colleagues who felt the need to take industrial action today. I hope they will reconsider their decision. Unions in the past have claimed, rightly, that they want to stand up for education. But today I fear the one union that is going on strike is standing up not for our children, not for the interests of our children, but for their own pay and conditions. I urge them to put aside confrontation and to join all of us who are in this hall, all of us who are standing up for education, putting schools first and foremost, and making sure that our deprived children can benefit from change most of all. So I want to thank all of you for coming here today, for your commitment to the future of education and to the future of every individual child in your care. And I'd like to thank the Education Foundation for all their hard work to create this event today. I know that it will be celebratory, ambitious and inspiring. And I'd like to thank you all for being here at this turning point in creating a global movement of education reform. Thank you.